Hi, I'm Hugo Gurdon, editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner, and this is Political Perspectives. If you're joining us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. I am joined by Byron York, our chief political correspondent. And Byron, I wanted to talk about Elon Musk, who's obviously a lot of people want to talk about, and he's a highly controversial figure. He has recently been accused of suggesting this is accused by Democrats and the other fearmongers of wishing to cut Social Security and other entitlements. Let's have a look at the clip of his interview with Larry Kudlow on Fox News, where he was talking about Social Security and discuss what he was actually saying and the divergence between the fearmongering and the facts.
What we're adding here is caring and competence. And there's a massive amount of fraud of basically people submitting Social Security numbers for Social Security benefits, unemployment, Small Business Administration loans.
So in that clip, Musk identifies entitlements as being one of the biggest areas that the federal government spends money on. And he pointed up hundreds of millions of dollars of possible savings there. But he was talking about waste, fraud, and abuse. He was not talking, contradicting the president, was he, on actually attacking entitlements?
No, he was not attacking entitlements. This kind of set off the knee-jerk, reflective, Democratic Republicans are going to roll grandma off the cliff reflex that just seems to come out, anytime a Republican talks about entitlements. But Musk was clearly talking about reforming some of the abuse and waste in entitlements, especially in Medicare. It's a major problem in that particular program. But no, he was not talking about eliminating Social Security or Medicare or any other entitlement program.
Right. And I think he kind of clarified that to some extent with Trump later on, but it was having to clear it up. But the fact that they had to clear up this mess is attributable, I think, not simply to the fear-mongering by those who wish to pretend that the administration is doing something which it isn't doing. But you wrote recently, it's also to some extent attributable to Musk having a problem about the way he talks. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Well, there's a couple of things. The Kudlow interview, and Musk has not done a lot of sit-down interviews, but the interview with Larry Kudlow on Fox Business was an example of showing that Musk in public forums and in interviews and other communications is not a particularly articulate fellow. Now, people who can build rockets that do miracle things are not always, television quality great communicators. So that's not really an issue in terms of Musk's competence to do the job that he's doing. But it does say that perhaps DOGE could use some people who are good communicators to communicate that. In addition, Musk has a communications problem in the sense that he often really can't seem to stop himself from talking or especially posting on X, which after all he owns. But DOGE is extremely controversial, even though majorities of Americans agree that there's waste in government, and they certainly agree that they want that waste found and eliminated, and they support the efforts of DOGE, and yet it's still so controversial. So there are a few reasons for that. One, Democrats and the media certainly want DOGE to fail because they want President Trump to fail. And for a second reason, the entrenched bureaucracy wants DOGE to fail because they want to see an expanding and ever more expensive bureaucracy. But there are a couple of reasons that have to do with DOGE as well. One, the style of the people that DOGE has hired, that is tech types, view their work in a different way than government bureaucrats do. They're, the move fast to break things idea, and they failure is part of what they do. Musk has often said that if you haven't failed, then you're not aiming high enough.
Right.
But then the final thing, the final issue is that Musk himself really has a difficult time stopping himself from talking. And an example I gave was recently Mark Kelly. He's the senator, Democratic senator, politically ambitious from Arizona, went to Ukraine, comes back, and does a series of tweets saying that Trump is doing it all wrong in Ukraine and we can't abandon Ukraine and we have to give them security guarantees and that's the way to peace and we can't coddle Putin. It was very much Democratic boilerplate.
Right.
And Musk responded to this, quote, "You are a traitor."
Yeah. Yeah.
And you think, wow, where did that come from? And of course, it set off a lot of controversy, not only because Kelly is a retired Navy fighter pilot who flew combat missions in the Gulf War, and then he was a NASA astronaut, flew 4 missions on the space shuttle, and you think he's calling this guy a traitor, really?
Right.
So Musk just creates problems for himself that he doesn't have to create.
Right. So, speaking of creating problems for oneself, which are unnecessary, let's turn our attention to President Trump and tariffs. We are
Mm.
now looking, particularly in our relations with Canada, to be in a full-blown trade war where there is retaliation and escalation and then suspension and returns. And it's happening so fast that it's actually really rather difficult to keep up. Now, it spooked the markets, which have lost a lot, 10%. People are talking about it being in recession territory and that the tariffs themselves being sufficient to stifle economic activity to the extent of causing some kind of recession. This is the opposite, isn't it, of what President Trump was elected to do. He was elected on the grounds of economic competence after the mismanagement of Biden. Yet he seems to want sometimes to engage in this, volatile rhetoric and exchange, lob sort of rhetorical bombs at Canada. Is this really a wise way of proceeding?
No, what a question. No, it's not. It's not a great way to do this. First of all, we should point out that during the campaign, President Trump talked about tariffs a lot. It was a big, big theme of his campaign. We knew he was going to do it, and we expected him to do it.
Right,
The issue is how he has done it. And if you talk to business people, especially those who have any business that goes over back and forth over the border, U.S.-Canada border, um, they are being driven crazy by the changes that are taking place. That one tariff is threatened, one tariff is imposed, then it's brought back, it's postponed for a month. There have been a few carve-outs for specific products or commodities in it, and we don't know what's going on today, and we barely figured out what went on yesterday.
right,
And that does actually create uncertainty. And now, if Trump had imposed the tariffs that he promised to begin with and did not change, those people would be adjusting to the new reality as we speak.
right,
They might not like it, but they would be adjusting to the new reality. Now they're kind of pulling their hair out,
right,
and you're seeing what's happening in the stock market, which has an enormous emotional component. People are confused and they get scared.
right. So, but it's a strong contrast with the way that President Trump dealt with border security, and this
Yeah.
is something that we have noted in an editorial in the magazine. Is that on border security, Trump did some very clear, decisive things. They were things that the public could understand, and they were very quickly effective. And that there's such a sharp contrast between the way he dealt with that and the way he dealt with or is dealing with tariffs. Is this because, frankly, he understands sovereignty and the importance of the national border sort of more fundamentally than he does the economy? There's not a lot of economists who support the idea of tariffs, but it's a very sharp contrast with having clear, decisive, and effective action on the one, and lots of confusion and upset on the other.
Well, I would say that first of all, you're right in describing the situation. I would say they're different activities, and that it was easier to turn around, or in this case, to stop the flow of illegal border crossers, pretty much on a dime. Easier to do that than it is to change trade policy or fix a trade imbalance or something like that. And Trump's great line at his speech to Congress.
The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation. We must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president.
Democrats and the media had told you that we had to have legislation to solve the problem at the border. The problem at the border cried out for legislation when all you really needed was a new president.
Right.
Tariff and trade is just a little more complicated than that. I mean, the astonishing thing about the border when Biden and the Democratic Party let it get so bad was that there really were some very simple solutions, which is to tell people that if they cross into the United States illegally, they will not be allowed to stay. And if they believe it, they'll stop coming. And that's exactly what has happened.
Right.
It's more difficult to do in the world of international trade.
Yeah. I want to turn to briefly as a final question to the issue of Ukraine, and it's connected to that idea of that you were saying that you love the question when I say, is it wise to proceed in the way that Trump has on tariffs? The connection is this. The United States, with Secretary of State Rubio leading the discussions, has emerged with a ceasefire agreement with Ukraine. And this follows a lot of very public beatdowns by the president, by the vice president, of President Zelensky of Ukraine. And there's been a lot that's said in public there, which people think should be said in private. And it, rather as in the question of tariffs, there's been a lot said in public when, in fact, people think there should be sort of much more deliberate and cautious rhetoric in public, with the tough stuff being said in private. But is the ceasefire agreement from Ukraine, to some extent, it gives the White House some bragging rights, but are these bragging rights, as it were, justified? Does Trump and is this a vindication of the kind of volatile public diplomacy that this administration goes in for, and which causes a lot of people, heartburn?
Well, Trump has had a multi-part plan of what to do in Ukraine, and his opposition has basically condemned him from the very beginning that he's just simply pro-Putin and he's just going to turn everything over to Putin. And that's certainly not what his plan is. And now, this one-sided ceasefire agreement at the moment was accompanied by the resumption of intelligence sharing, U.S. intelligence sharing with Ukraine, and arms deliveries to Ukraine, actually putting some pressure now on Russia. And I think we're at a point now that's certainly the most important point that we've been at in this process, and that is, we're going to see what Russia says.
Right.
Trump is sending an emissary to Russia to talk with Putin himself. And I believe the really huge question is, if you look at a map of Ukraine and you see that Russia controls about 20% of the territory of Ukraine, I think that includes Crimea, which they took more than a decade ago. But the question stopping this war has always been, what territory that Russia has taken will it give back to Ukraine? What territory can Ukraine regain? But also, what territory will Ukraine give up because it was taken by force by Russia after the invasion? I mean, that's going to be the way this whole thing is settled. It's a question of borders and territory. And we haven't heard anything from Russia about this. So this might be the beginning of hearing from Russia, and that's going to be super important.
Yeah, super important, Byron. Exactly. I think that what we have to see is the extent to which President Trump is now willing to put pressure on Putin and make
Yeah.
him realize that it's in his interests to end the war. That's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very much, Byron, for joining me. Thank you all for joining us, and join us next time on Political Perspectives.